Well, hello, good evening, and hey, welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. You have reached episode 8. It is November the 18th, 2020. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. I hope everybody out there is safe. I hope everybody is healthy, and hopefully we can at least give you an hour of some really good hockey talk, and we definitely are going to have that tonight. But before we get going, I just want to give a special shout out to several people, the frontline workers that are out there, whether it be in the healthcare industry, from doctors and nurses, all the way down to food service, if you work in the grocery line or anywhere in between. I really just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing to help keep us all safe during this crazy pandemic. So thank you. We really can't come up with the words to describe everything that you do for us. So we very much appreciate that. And fans, again, thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, and you will not miss a thing on any of our interviews. So please do that for us. So this week, like I said, we're going to have a really good show. We're going to have the Leafs panel on in about 30 minutes. We're going to take a real deep dive into the Toronto Maple Leafs. And right now, we're going to spend 30 good minutes talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins. And we are honored to be joined by the radio play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's Josh Getzoff. Josh, welcome to the Hockey Writers Live.
Great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. First and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm good. I can't really complain. Things have been, slow. I think, like everyone else can say, you're kind of very closely following all the news regarding the league and the return to play, and hopeful that it will be when they're projecting for January 1st. And kind of, waiting things out on that front and seeing what will happen, but trying to keep busy in the meantime. So I'm sure just like much others.
Yeah, so we're all doing, just waiting on the news like everybody else. We feel like that we're all in the same boat. We see possible talk of January 1st, maybe later. I know that there's different groups, players, general managers all meeting, and we're just waiting to see, what kind of a season are we going to have? Is it going to be a shortened season? It's just so many questions out there. So Josh, just how surreal is it that we're sitting basically at home in a virtual setting like this, and you're not calling games right now?
Yeah, I think I saw something on Twitter today, like a picture of Austin Matthews that said day 1 of Zoom meetings, and he was in his full suit, and then it was like day 250 of Zoom meetings, and he's got his stash going. He's wearing like a robe and socks. I was like, that is very accurate, because that's, I think, what everyone kind of feels right now. Like, you have to do these things because they're the option. They are fun. I enjoy them. I think we all miss the person-to-person interaction for sure, both amongst the media and with the players that we cover. But this is the next best thing, and this is what we're doing right now. So I've embraced it. I know you guys have also. I've watched a couple of these. You do a great job with these.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think that it's the new norm for now, and we're making the most of it.
Really appreciate that, Josh. So yeah, speaking of the virtual setting, how are the Penguins adapting to that, and how are they still able to reach their fans? I think I saw Sid do something the other day virtually to a fan, just incredibly awesome stuff. So that's the kind of thing that you're still trying to do during this pandemic to reach the fans, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We so with Hockey Fights Cancer Month in November, we actually honored one of our arena workers who's been with the organization for a long time, over a decade, and just finished her chemotherapy treatments for breast cancer, and is on the other side of it, but still has a hell of a road ahead. So we brought her into the dressing room and honored her with a couple of things. And as you mentioned, Sidney Crosby recorded a video for her. So that was pretty special to see and be a part of. And she's an unbelievable person. And like so many other people that have been touched by that horrible disease, like, it just amazes me the attitude that they have.
Yeah.
And their ability to stay positive, because I don't know if I'd be like that if I was in that situation. I don't know if I'd be able to keep such a happy face and everything at all times. So it's so impressive to me to see people like that, and it's inspiring. So wish her all the best, Katie, and it was great to be around her that day.
Yeah, and yeah, Katie, we absolutely wish the same for you as well, and everybody that's fighting this horrible disease. I know we either know someone personally or we know people that are battling it, and November is usually a month that the NHL honors those people, and we wish nothing but the best. And hopefully as time goes on, that as the technology gets on and the research goes on, that we'll finally find a cure to beat cancer once and for all. So really good stuff there, Josh. So what do you do to pass the time when you're not, worrying about trying to find content for the Penguins and stuff like that? Or have you found like TV shows, anything else just to try and pass the time?
Yeah, I've become, my wife would argue with this, but I've become a bit of a handyman, just doing some stuff around the house. Some of it is stuff that I'm proud of. Some of it is stuff that I would probably never show anybody. But I'm trying to, bought a saw, I bought some stuff to do some woodworking and just to keep myself busy, like we said, to pass time. So that's been fun, especially, it was such a nice summer weather-wise, here in Pittsburgh. And I mean, it was nice to be outside a lot. So that kind of influenced me wanting to do stuff outside and, build stuff and things of that nature. But as far as the TV shows, we've been deep diving into Netflix. Schitt's Creek is, I don't know if anyone
Great
out there
show.
has seen it. Unbelievable. I can't believe it took me so long to get into it. Kind of like The Office. Last year was the first time I ever watched The Office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't know where I was on that one, but it was obviously the funniest show I've ever seen. And Schitt's Creek is right up there. Another great one too. So two really, really fun things to pass the time there.
So Josh, couple things. One, I'm probably going to have to take lessons off of you for some of the handyman stuff. My wife's been after me for a while for that one, so might have to hit you up. But then the thing that we've been depending on, and we were kind of fortunate to get into this because of how hard it is to find a Nintendo Switch. So we went online, and Walmart, of all places, had one available. We saw it, we placed an order for it, and then somehow they must have handed it off to somebody else. Like they went into the store and sold the one that we bought. So we had to wait extra days in order to get it. And then they finally got a delivery in and we were able to get a Switch. And we've been really going at the Mario Kart, Mario Deluxe, and other games like that. And she can attest that I've thrown the controller maybe a few too many times in frustration, but that's really what it comes down to. It's just, we're all kind of in the same boat with Netflix, Hulu, video games, whatever it is. This is an unprecedented time. We haven't had outside of the bubble, we haven't had games since March. And that's just, it's insane to me that here we are. We normally be a month into the regular season,
right?
And we're still possibly a couple months out yet.
No, Wednesday night, you'd probably be looking at, a national doubleheader of games. And it's weird. I will say that I feel like the last couple of weeks, particularly this past week, is when it really hit me what was going on timeline wise. Like I've heard a lot of people say, the body is programmed when you start to do this for so long. I think that's true to an extent, but we also, like you said, we haven't been doing this since March. So it's almost programmed in a different direction right now, unfortunately. But I think, with the sun going down earlier, with it getting, especially the last couple of days here in Pittsburgh, just bitterly cold. That made me kind of realize, like, wow, there's no hockey right now. Like, this is a bummer. And obviously there are much bigger issues at hand in the world, but it definitely was kind of a reality check for sure.
Same, and I'm up here in Erie, and it's pretty much the same thing. Got bitterly cold. There was snow in the car this morning. Then a couple of days later, it's going to be 60 degrees. So it's Western Pennsylvania for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're right. It did hit. It would be neck deep. Whether it be the OHL, the Erie Otters, whether it be with the Penguins, the Blue Jackets. Whatever the case might be. It's just surreal all the way around. But there are bigger things in play, and I know that at the end of the day, everyone will agree to this, that we want to be safe, we want the players to be safe, and we want to come back in a way that guarantees the safety of everybody involved. And no matter how long that takes, I feel like that you don't rush something like that. You make sure all your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, do it the right way, and in the long run, that'll have the benefit. So
agreed. Yep.
So if you're just joining us, this is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 8. I'm your host, Mark Scheig, and we are spending 30 good minutes with Penguins radio broadcaster Josh Getzoff. And I tell you what, Josh, you got a pretty awesome job because you get to learn from the legend Mike Lang. Anybody who's really followed hockey for a long time knows of him. Can you just describe what it's like to be able to learn from a living legend like that in your position, being the radio play-by-play broadcaster?
Well, I can tell you, this will be my 6th season with the Penguins coming up here. And obviously Mike's I think this is going to be his 45th, I want to say. But he is someone that, when I first came here, I still remember my very first day in training camp, going into the dressing room and being introduced to him and Phil Bourque. And he said to me, he's like, "How old are you?" And I said, 27. He said, "That's how old I was when I came to Pittsburgh." And I just it's always resonated with me. I feel like that he kind of sees, I'm not saying from a play-by-play perspective, no one's at his level, but I think he sees a little bit of me and other facets in him, or excuse me, himself in me. And he has taken me under his wing. I mean, there's no question about it. He's been, someone that after every single game that I call, the first text I get is from Mike Lang. It's a thought about the game, maybe something that I said that made him laugh, anything. It's always something positive, something, even if they lose, a little like one-liner that'll make me laugh after the game. And it means a lot. And I know it's not much for him to send a text message, but it's, I think, a kind of an example of our relationship, that it just goes beyond, him being the guy and me, learning underneath him. There's definitely more depth to it. We've been in communication quite a bit here during this whole pandemic, and he doesn't live too far away from me. So I've seen him a couple of times from distance, of course. Yep. He's, a guy that I think from when I first started doing the play-by-play for the Penguins, he was the one who really facilitated that, because he felt like if he wasn't going to be able to be in that seat, he wanted me to be in that seat. And he felt like he trusted me there. So, I mean, that obviously meant more to me than anything, as far as whether the Penguins felt it was good, whether the fans thought it was good. If Mike Lang thought it was okay, that's good by me. Then absolutely. Then I felt like I was approved on that point. So one quick aside with him, he did give me, when I first started, an egg timer that, excuse me, for time and score, that he was originally given by Bob Prince, who I'm sure you know. And of course, Bob Prince, the gunner guy, for people who don't know, legendary Pittsburgh Pirates broadcaster, who was around when Mike started here in Pittsburgh, and is a part of that holy trinity of Bob Prince, Myron Cope, and Mike Lang here for broadcasters in the city that have made an unbelievable impression on the fans. So, yeah, he gave me that, and I still use it every game. It sits right in front of me. I'm not going to say I flip it for time and score every 3 minutes, because I do look at the scoreboard. We are in 2020, but I do keep it, and I think it's one of the coolest things I own from a broadcast perspective. So,
I mean, anybody who's just listened to the Mike and his sayings, just to hear the human side, everything what you've said, what others have said about him. He's a living legend for that reason, and it's that human element that he brings. And I mean, I've had a couple of interactions with him, whether it be in Pittsburgh or Columbus, and it's only been momentary. But in those couple of minutes, it really felt like that he valued me as a person. He wanted to know how I was doing. He always had a story, and he was always laughing. It's like, that's what I want to be like. Somebody like him. He has the respect of the room, and he's just so good at what he does. So in Pittsburgh, you're right. They're known for the broadcasters, the Trinity. I mean, they still got Bill Hillgrove still calling games. Yeah, right. Terry called Pirate games for the longest time. Just, if you're landing in Pittsburgh and you're a broadcaster, you're on your way to great things. And just hearing what Mike did for you with the egg timer, I don't think I'm ever going to forget that now. So
yeah, me either.
Good stuff. So let's flip over to the team itself here, because obviously the last time that we checked in with the Penguins, Montreal knocked them out, but several changes have been made. So first one that jumps out at me, of course, is the big trade for Kasperi Kapanen. And I just wonder, what can fans expect to see from him? How do you feel like it might start out? Like, would he play with Sid? Would he play with Evgeny Malkin? Like, how do you see that playing out at the beginning, Josh?
Well, I think one of the interesting things when it comes to Kapanen is that the Penguins know him. They drafted him in 2014. Of course, he was a part of the Kessel trade, never played a game for Pittsburgh, and went over to Toronto. And I think has had a solid performance there. I wouldn't say he was, anything more than above average in the role that he played for the Leafs. But he did have a 20-goal season, and he's still very young. So I know that that's definitely two aspects that the Penguins are looking at as far as a guy that can come in and make an impact in this lineup. And as I mentioned, they know him, they drafted him. There's not a lot to learn as far as the player that they're getting. In fact, I think that's what makes them excited about getting him, because they know the player that they're getting from Toronto. And, again, he's 24 years old. He makes them younger. He makes them faster. He makes them a little bigger. He's got some bite to his game. As we've seen here in Pittsburgh, he actually had a fight with Zach Aston-Reese this past year in a game in Toronto. But a guy, as far as where he projects on this team, I think, in my conversations with Mike Sullivan in the last couple of weeks, he's going to play on the first line. He's going to start with Sidney Crosby on his right wing. Jake Guentzel will be on the left wing. And I mean, on paper, that's a pretty good line. Yeah. And I think the Penguins feel like that 20-goal season that Kasperi had a couple of years back for Toronto is not just attainable, but even potentially something that can be surpassed playing with guys like Crosby and Guentzel, to begin this season. He'll be given every opportunity. I mean, you remember last year, the Penguins acquired Alex Galchenyuk for Phil Kessel, and they gave him every opportunity. That doesn't always mean that it works.
That's
but
true.
I think they feel like that this is a guy in Kapanen that they know can play this role that they're hoping for, this unbelievably difficult spot to fill as Sidney Crosby's right winger. When you think about it, like it's just that it's almost as elusive to the Penguins as a third line center the last couple of seasons. They just can't find the right guy to fit there. There have been guys that have worked, no question, but that solid fit. And I think they're hoping, with Guentzel being a younger guy, obviously, and Sid, in not the end of his career, but in a position here where I think you want to maximize these years. You add a guy like Kapanen, and all of a sudden that top line looks pretty formidable on paper.
It absolutely does. It'd be really interesting to see, if they can find that success, because, if they can find the right fit, it seems like Crosby can make anybody good. And if you got talent, you can make a good player, possibly a great player. So another trade that the Penguins did make, though, too, was the Patrick Hornquist deal that saw Colton Sevier and Mike Matheson brought to the Penguins. So kind of a two-parter. Hornquist meant a lot to the Penguins, the character, the leadership, just the way they played the game, just brought energy. So how can they replace that? And then what can we expect to see from the new arrivals in Sevier and Matheson?
Well, I'll start with Hornquist. Excuse me. Hornquist is he's a unique guy, as you know, from covering the many matchups and many spirited matchups the Penguins and Blue Jackets have had over the years. Patrick Hornquist generally is a guy that's always involved in that. He will be missed. I actually do not think he will be replaced because of the intangibles that he brings, but I think that's a bullet the Penguins had to bite given their situation. And Hornquist's contract, quite honestly, for a team like the Penguins, I don't want to say it was dead weight, but it was something that was not going to be conducive to them adding more important pieces, this year, next year, in the years that I think they're really trying to maximize the window they have with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. So they will miss him. There's no question. For the first power play unit where he, obviously was so effective as a net mouth presence, I would look to see Jake Guentzel there to replace him. That doesn't mean that he will replace him as far as what Patrick Hornquist did. I still think Jake is a much tougher player than people realize, just getting to watch him every night, the beatings that he takes, and he always pops back up. But they'll miss Hornquist for a variety of reasons. This is a guy that, is a leader in the dressing room, extremely vocal, high energy, but also a guy that can score 15, 20 goals a season and sacrifice his body at a level that is not matched by many other power forwards in this league. So I think that they will miss him in that aspect. I do look forward to the guys that are coming on board and how they will fit. And I've said this a couple times, no disrespect to the Hornquist of the world, Patrick Marleau, who a lot of people forget was a Penguin at the end of last year.
Right.
Those guys are not bottom six players, and they don't know necessarily how to play that bottom six role. It's not their fault. They've been up in the lineup. Excuse me. They've been up in the lineup for much of their careers. So when you're asking them to play, as the Penguins did, a third line role, fourth line role, which, it comes with 12 to 15 minutes of ice time, maybe less, give or take, special team situations, generally probably starting from more of a defensive posture than an offensive situation. It can test guys that necessarily aren't used to that role. I think in a guy like Colton Sevier, he knows that role. Mm-hmm. He's a bottom six player. He can do penalty killing. He can take faceoffs. And I think the Penguins are excited about that because when you look more now at what the Penguins have in their bottom six, these are guys that really are those kind of players. And I don't mean that as a knock. I mean that more as they understand that role. Like the Mark Jankowskis of the world coming over from Calgary, Teddy Bluger, Brandon Tanev. I think Jared McCann will probably start in the bottom six. I don't know if he'll stay there, but he probably will be, at least to start the season. Those are guys that I think really look at this situation and know that those minutes that they can play, they can maximize to their skill strengths. And the Penguins really look at it, I think, from talking to Mike Sullivan, those six guys I just mentioned, they're not necessarily a third line and a fourth line. They don't really know where they fit as far as like saying a guy, this line's going to be our fourth line. And I think that's a positive because they're not necessarily sure from a timing standpoint, an ice time standpoint, a matchup standpoint, what gives them an advantage, if there even is an advantage with those two groups of three. So I think that in a way is an advantage for the Penguins to have more susceptible players to that role deeper in their lineup. And that's what Sevier will give them.
Absolutely. Got two more for you here, Josh, before we let you go. So talked about the new trades. Now the Penguins are going to come in with a new full-time number one goalie, Matt Murray in Ottawa now. Tristan Jarry is ready to take over the reins. So, and you being able to watch him from then until now, what makes him ready for that role? And then who do you expect to possibly be his backup when the season begins?
Well, I can say to you, Mark, that Tristan Jarry, last year, 20 wins, all-star selection, really strong game. Season for the Penguins, and a year where I think it was the first 25 games, Matt Murray started 18 of them. And of the 7 starts that Jarry had, I want to say 5 of them were in a back-to-back setting. So he really, started the season behind the 8 ball from just a rep standpoint, from anything kind of a comfortability standpoint. And to have that kind of a year after that, I think speaks volumes to the growth that he's had as a pro. Clearly the skill set's always been there. You go back to his time in Edmonton in the Western Hockey League, obviously in the AHL with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and in the little dose that he's had with the Penguins. A lot of people forget that a couple years ago, he won 14 games for the Penguins when they were still trying to figure out some stuff with some injuries to Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury in that campaign. But now you look at the situation, and obviously he's the clear-cut starter. I think a lot of times in talking to people within the Penguins organization, the biggest thing with Tristan was him taking the approach that he was a pro goalie. And by that, I mean some of his just work habits, his practice habits, making sure that every day he approached it trying to get better, not necessarily just showing up and being there and that being good enough. And I think for young kids, that takes some time to maybe hammer home. But for Jarry, it really seemed to resonate over the last year, and his results have spoken to that. And I think he's more than ready for this role. I think there will be something to be said for the fact that he can step into camp, hopefully in a month, and be the guy, not have any question that there's no looking over your shoulder. You're the number one guy. In a perfect world, you're going to play. If it's a 60-game season, you're going to play 40-plus games. If it's a 72-game season, you're going to play 50-plus games. And I really believe that. With that being said, I think Casey DeSmith is going to be your backup. And I asked Jim Rutherford about that after he traded Matt Murray. This was back at the draft in October, but he said he's more than comfortable with the combination of Jarry and DeSmith. One, it's cheap when all things considered. I know Casey's contract is just over $1 million a year. Tristan obviously signed for $3.5 million. But still, you're not spending a ton there between your two goaltenders for what I think they feel is a pretty solid situation. Because much like I mentioned with the bottom 6 players, DeSmith knows the role of the backup. DeSmith knows how to be in that situation, and he did win 15 games in the league just 2 years ago. So these are two guys that I think have a familiarity with each other, understand what their roles will be on this team, which I think is huge going into a season like this, and also probably realize that there will be some work to go around. If the schedule is going to be as jammed as they're saying it will be, they will have some opportunities, both of them, to 10 goal pretty often.
Yeah, so interesting stuff there. And one more for you, Josh, and I think this is where a lot of fans around the country really want to know. Crosby's getting up there in age. We know that Malkin's getting up there in age, but we know that they're still good enough to win it all. How many more legitimate chances do you think these Pittsburgh Penguins have with those two superstars down the middle?
I think realistically, Evgeny Malkin's contract runs 2 more years. that's probably your window, because no one knows where he's going to go after that. I mean, he could re-sign in Pittsburgh. He could go back to Russia, as we're hearing, Alex Ovechkin has made pretty public that that's a goal of his. And so often you see that with some of those Russian players. They want to finish their career in the KHL. I get that. I think it'll be interesting to see how he handles that. He has grown to love Pittsburgh. As you know, Pittsburgh loves him. And I think that'll be an interesting storyline to watch. But if you're asking me for a window, I've said this a few times already this offseason, I think it's the next 2 years is when it's going to be the widest for the Penguins. And that's not just because of Crosby and Malkin. Chris Letang's also in that category, and he's not getting any younger. But in their top six forwards, I think it's worth mentioning, there's some solid situation there in the sense that you have two really good lines on paper, Gensel, Crosby, and Kapanen, Zucker, Malkin, and Rust.
Yep.
And all six of those guys are under contract for the next 2 years. So that group in this window is going to be together, at least, as we see it right now. So I think that's something that should give people confidence. Tristan Jarry certainly should give you confidence. And I really do think the Penguins are a team that, they made themselves better this offseason. I'm always hesitant to say that because no one really knows. Yeah, exactly. I thought they made themselves better last offseason, and clearly I was wrong. But it's interesting because I think that the signings that they made make a lot of sense with what they needed in their lineup. Yep. And that's the way you have to look at it. So are they giving themselves the best chance to win based on what they've done? Yes, I think they are. And it'll be interesting to see if they're able to maximize these 2 years because, listen, the Metro Division, it's not getting any easier. In fact, it's getting way more difficult with a kid named Lafreniere coming in. So it's going to be really interesting to watch.
The Metro Heloton. So what? Lafreniere came in, Svechnikov, Dubois. How many top one? Jack Hughes. How many top 3 picks has the Metro had?
Right, Capo Caco. I mean, these guys are all, they're all in there now.
Yeah, and so these next couple of years will be really interesting. You said they have the opportunity. Just can they take advantage of it? Josh, we really appreciate you joining us tonight, talking the Penguins. All the best, and fans, make sure you follow him at PensJG. And he's on the radio, does a great job. Give him a follow. Josh, thanks for the time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Of course, Mark, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. That was Josh Getzoff from the Pittsburgh Penguins. And, like he said, it'll be really interesting to see. The pieces are there when you've got Crosby, when you've got Malkin, when you've got that top 6 that he called out, Brian Rust, Jake Gensel's back and healthy, and Jason Zucker. I mean, the opportunity is there. Chris Letang is there. Can the goaltending answer the call? Like you said, there's a lot of questions, but 2 more years, that's what they're signed for. So they're going to go for it. Can they make it happen? We definitely will see. So we're going to transition now into our panel for the night. And we're going to be talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we got some really good questions for our panel tonight. So let's bring in Peter Baracchini. Hello, Peter. There he is.
Mark, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And joining him tonight is Kevin Armstrong. Hello, Kevin. I think he's still connecting. Hello, Kevin.
Hello. How you doing, Mark?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. In snowy Edmonton.
Snowy Edmonton. Oh, so you're mentioning earlier that it's already well, of course, it's snowy season pretty much from October on up there. So not really much of a surprise.
Yes, but now is when I'm really missing hockey. It's a beautiful night, snow. Yeah. It's time for some hockey.
It is time for some hockey, and it wouldn't be hockey if we didn't have the third member of our panel. Let's welcome Andrew Forbes to the panel. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going, Mark? Happy to be back.
It's great to have you guys back, and we got some really interesting questions for you tonight on what does this have to do with the Leafs? Well, if you stay with us for the next 30 minutes, you're going to know how this affects the Leafs. So let us start with Peter, and listen. They signed Joe Thornton. I know that. We're going to get to him in a minute, but there's this narrative out there that I really want to hear from you guys about the leadership. The way they lost to Columbus, and there's some people out there questioning the leadership in the room. So, Peter, my question to you is, Do the Toronto Maple Leafs have a leadership problem? And then if you think they do, why? Or if not, why not?
I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, literally since, the rebuild began, they've been trying to find their identity. They had, the young core step in and, recently they tried to bring in Jake Muzzin as sort of that, leadership presence with Stanley Cup experience. They brought in John Tavares and then they brought in Jason Spezza. That still didn't quite seem enough. It wasn't enough to get them over that hump, especially, during the playing series against Columbus. This time around, they brought in Joe Thornton and Wayne Simmons, players who have shown that maybe that they have that kind of mentality to help push this team over the limit, lay everything on the line, finishing your checks and getting on the forecheck to do the things that they sort of lacked. And I think it's more so of a maturity thing and also a psychological aspect that has hindered them from getting further during the past few seasons. I mean, they face a lot of disappointments and now they have to channel that in a way where, enough is enough. We're sick and tired of losing. We got to find this opportunity to win because that's what, the team expects and that's what the fan base expects.
Kevin, what do you think about the leadership there?
It's kind of amazing that we even talk about that when you look at that room and the amount of letters that guys have worn in the past now, especially with the signings this offseason. So there better be leadership there now. But I kind of agree with Peter. It showed up there, even when you look back during the play-in series and it was Spezza dropping the gloves of all guys to try to rally the team late. And also when you look at it, how long did it take to name a captain? Phaneuf left a long time ago, and it took a long time to put a C on somebody. And I don't know if that kind of the psychological thing that Peter was talking about, if everyone was like, I don't want to be the leader yet, we're all in this together, that type of feeling or what it was, but no one was taking the reins and really running with it. And we saw that really show up in the play-in series.
Andrew, what do you think?
I think both of you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, we don't know what went on behind the scenes. There was that whole debacle of, where was the C going to go with the whole Matthews thing down in Arizona. And, obviously the Leafs come out and say that it was John Tavares' letter to lose the entire time. And obviously, we have to kind of take what they say with a grain of salt. We don't know what happened behind the scenes. That being said, you're talking about a guy in John Tavares who came from a team where, they were so used to losing in New York, and he wore the C there. And from the outside looking in, I think he did a hell of a job, being the guy, the go-to guy to kind of take it on the chin every time the Islanders lost when he was with New York. And he's kind of stepped into a locker room where you have a young core. And we have to remember, this is still a young core. These guys are just hitting their stride. And I think with that said, none of them were ready to lead a team, especially in a hockey mecca like Toronto. But, they're not bringing in Joe Thornton for 50 to 70 points. They're bringing in Joe Thornton because he's a guy that's going to hold people accountable. He's going to be in the dressing room and he's going to have something to say when, these young guys maybe don't put the effort forth on, every given shift. So I think he brings more to the room than we really give him credit for at this point. But that being said, it's going to be up to him and up to Spezza and up to, Simmons and guys like that to come in and kind of, teach these young guys, this is how you are when you want to become a pro.
And Andrew, that's a perfect segue to the next topic we're going to talk about. And Kevin, we'll start with you on this one. Joe Thornton is there, and Andrew just referenced it. He might bring in a lot more than we realize, and it's not just simply for points or for offense. So my question to you guys, and start with Kevin, what are some realistic expectations that we should see with Joe Thornton being on the Leafs now?
All the projections and we're working together on a bit of a roundtable on what we see as our lineup. And I've got Joe Thornton penciled in as a third line center. And I think he might even be getting some power play time in there as well. The guy is a force in front of the net. When I first joined the Hockey Writers, I was covering the LA Kings, watching a lot of San Jose games because of that. Joe Thornton, every time he's on the ice, he was getting attention paid to him. He was causing havoc in front of the net. I think everyone's looking, of course, the stats are down. Of course they're down. this guy he's old, right? But he's over in Europe playing right now. How many of these young guys are sitting at home playing their video games, and you got the old guys still playing hockey, waiting for the season to start? He's going to come in and look great. Of course, it's not going to be his awesome seasons from 15 years ago, but he is going to show this team in the locker room what they need to do, and he's going to bring it on the ice, I think, every night.
And Andrew, you mentioned what Thornton can bring. What do you feel like he can actually bring? Like, where would he slot into your lineup?
Yeah, I think Kevin's got it. I think I've got him at third line center right now. But like I said, you're not going to expect 50 points out of this guy. I think if you get 30, in roughly 70, 75 games, that's a steal for you. You're paying him league minimum at this point. He's a guy he's 41 years old. He's out, like Peter and I have talked on our podcast about, he's a guy that's going out there and playing on the big ice surface and still putting up points overseas right now. He's got his legs under him. He's staying fit. If anybody saw that picture of him and Burnsy walking around in San Jose with their shirts off, this guy's still really, really good in shape and, ready to get on the ice and play. And he's a gamer, right? Like, this is a guy that's a gamer. He's brought up on a farm and has that mentality that you work hard, you go out there and you play hard, and you're going to get results. And I think that's where his presence isn't just going to be in the dressing room, but he's going to be a presence on the ice. He's a physical body. He's a guy that you can certainly slot right in front of the net on the power play. And he's going to be that big body that creates havoc, whether it be in his zone or in the offensive end as well.
And Peter, I think the interesting thing when I saw this was he hasn't won a cup yet. He's in his 40s, and he ended up choosing Toronto. So I think that could be a sign that he believes in what's going on there. I mean, he essentially could have picked anywhere he wanted, especially if he was going after a cup. So what does that say about the Leafs that he chose them? And then what do you expect?
Well, just basing off what both Andrew and Kevin have said, Andrew and I joked about it on our podcast. We call him our top prospect overseas right now, considering, he's playing in Switzerland. It says a lot. It kind of goes back to when Patrick Marleau left San Jose to sign with Toronto. Granted, that contract is completely different from what Joe Thornton signed, but it speaks volumes to the fact that, this is a veteran guy who still believes in the fact that, with the skill that they have, with the improvements that they made on defense, this team is compatible. On paper, it looks like that. It's just more so seeing that transition to the ice and whether or not that the play, follows suit with that. And kind of similar to what both Kevin and Andrew said, I expect a third line center, maybe wing, depending on how things work with Alexander Kerfoot, because he is a dual player as well. Power play minutes, but what's intriguing to me is the possibility in a game-breaking situation, maybe in a Game 7 first round against, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out the Columbus Blue Jackets, Mark. You need someone to protect the lead. You have both Jason Spezza, you have Joe Thornton to win that key face-off in your own zone. Those are the kind of guys that you want to have in that situation to help save a game. And given his durability, given the fact that, he can still play, he's going to be that kind of player. He's going to be a role player. Any chance he could get, he's going to win. And again, production-wise, not expecting a whole lot, although I would like to see, would have liked to have Joe Thornton in his prime where he's getting 120 points and 90 assists. But realistically, it's not going to happen. But we know that he can still be an offensive driver, getting on the forecheck and setting up plays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Andrew, let's go over to you now on this one. So, the Leafs have changed since the last time that we've talked. TJ Brody's on board. Zach Bogosian's on board. The Leafs did not re-sign Tyson Barrie. So, the defense has changed. My question for you guys, and Andrew, we'll start with you, like I said. Do you feel like that this is an improved defense? I feel like that they are improved, but how improved is this defense? Is this a sign of strength given the moves that they've made now?
I think it's a step in the right direction for sure. I was just kind of looking at Corsi 4 percentage from last season and TJ Brody's just over 52%. Bogosian's just over 53.5%. The one thing that's worth noting is career-wise, Bogosian's under 50%. But that being said, he played for a solid lineup in Tampa Bay last season. That said, I think you kind of going off of the centers that Peter was talking about. You've got 4 key guys down the middle now that are going to win you faceoffs. You're going to be starting most of the plays, let's say 62% of the time with the puck. That alone improves your defense. From an offensive standpoint. If you can start each play or 62% of the time with the puck, you don't rely as heavily as you maybe have in past seasons on your blue line. That being said, I mean, you mentioned Brody, you mentioned Bogosian, you mentioned that Barry's gone. See ya, sayonara. The one guy that you didn't mention is Mikko Lehtinen, and he's a guy that very well could be in the lineup to start the year. And in fact, watching some of the game tape from overseas, I'd be shocked if he wasn't in the lineup to start the season. That means that you're looking at possibly starting the year off without Justin Hall, without Travis Dermott. And, that brings into a lot of question what this defensive core is going to look like to start the 2020-21 season, whenever that may be. So, keep in mind, it may not be as young of a defensive core, but it's an experienced defensive core. This is the guys that have played, TJ Brody has played with Giordano. He's had that experience, that leadership, in his partners. Bogosian coming off of Stanley Cup. I mean, he knows, it was a little bit of a different Stanley Cup run this year, but he knows what it takes to grind it out and get to that point. So in that sense, I do think they took a step in the right direction. I don't think they have that stud defenseman that, you so often talk about. And a lot of the times when we talk about Stanley Cup winners, you're talking about them having stud defensemen. I know there are teams like Pittsburgh a few years back that kind of won as a core, but, not having that guy, it'll be interesting to see where this defensive core can take them. And again, I think you're going to see them rely less on Frederik Andersen because of what they've put in place. There's guys there that are willing to, lay down, use the body, block the puck, and kind of take some of that pressure off Andersen. And maybe that's why Dubas was interested in keeping Andersen around this year.
And Peter, I know a couple that we haven't talked about, or Andrew didn't bring up as well, Rasmus Sandin, Timothy Liljegren. I mean, we're talking a lot of players that are potential candidates here. And, and also, Morgan Riley, I would think that most would believe that he's the top defenseman that's there, maybe not in the Victor Hedman, the Seth Jones class, but he's the best there. Do you feel like that they've improved, and do you feel like that they can be a strength? Where do you stand?
Oh, I guess you go back to when they fully signed TJ Brody and they announced it. And I guess you look to least Twitter, this was kind of like a top 4 defenseman that, they've been longing to have, or find that defensive partner to actually play alongside Morgan Riley, because you saw the Cody Ceci experiment failed, the Tyson Barrie experiment failed. Nikita Zaitsev, that he didn't live up to expectations, especially after signing his contract. Ron Hainsey and Matt Hunwick in the past just were clearly not number 1 or top pairing defensemen. But I honestly, on paper right now, they have improved tremendously. Like, this is by far the best defense that I have seen in quite some time. And that started, as Andrew alluded to, with Mikko Lehtinen, and he basically talked about like the game tape and everything that he's done. And that's the reason why I did like an in-depth article on him, because I was so enamored with how well he's played and his transition to the KHL. And if he could transition that over, that's going to be a great signing for Toronto. But you mentioned Rasmus Sandin, is it going to be too crowded for him? I honestly think maybe he can crack the roster, but he's still going to be in a limited role as a third pairing. Could see what happened, last year with the World Juniors, send him back down if, minutes aren't what he wants. But it's going to be a different look for defense right now. And I don't want to jump the gun on this, but there's more hope this year than last year, than the year before, and the year before that. Because if you have a solid top four, you can roll with that as best as possible. And if you have Riley, Brody, Muzzin, and maybe Lettinen, and it's looking really good that he could crack the top four, again, on paper, that looks really good. We need to see that transition to the ice.
Kevin, we'll give you the last word on the Leafs defense.
Quite frankly, both these guys talk quite, at length about this. It could only get better. Last year was not a banner year for the Maple Leafs defense. And there were some guys there, but it wasn't even until the end of the season that they had all the defensive players that they actually wanted. That every time somebody would finally be off the injured list, somebody else is going down. And we saw Muzzin go down in Columbus series as well. Like, they were never healthy. We never actually saw them play how they should have. But to me, the defense is one thing. Of course, it's better. It can only get better, but it's the forwards that had to get better. I couldn't believe when Keefe gets back from the extended the pause from March, and he says, we're learning how to play defense as forwards now. Like, the forwards, the defensive unit, and Freddie Anderson have been saving this team for the last couple of seasons and a lot of games that they shouldn't have even been in. But if these forwards could actually do their job out there and play some defensive hockey, then that defense is going to look a lot better, and some less shots on Anderson as well.
Absolutely. It's 10 minutes to 9 on the East Coast. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 8. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and we are joined by our Leafs panel, Andrew Forbes, Peter Baracchini, and Kevin Armstrong. Got 3 more questions for you guys, and then I think this next one is going to be probably the funnest question of the night. So, Peter, we're going to start with you. So we're going to kind of give you the keys to the Leafs kingdom for a second. So we're going to pretend that you're Kyle Dubas. So they made a bunch of offseason moves as indicated, but I just wonder, if you had the opportunity, what is the one move that you wanted to see the Leafs make, but they ultimately did not make it or went in a different direction that you wish that they made? So, Peter, go ahead. Where do you stand with that one?
Well, aside from, the big fish and Alex Pietrangelo, but you know what? Given the cap situation, Dubas managed everything perfectly. But if there was one move that I think he could have made, or I would have liked to have seen, and one of our other fellow writers, Chris Feria, talked about this, about like the secondary scoring and the depth, and how that could be an issue, considering now that there's no Kasperi Kapanen and there's no Andreas Johnsson. I would have liked, and I was very high on him, for them to try and go after Craig Smith before he signed with the Boston Bruins. He's someone that could play in the middle 6 role, provide 20, 30 goals, 40, 50 points. He could go into the dirty areas, be a physical player, and I think he would have been a really good complementary piece in that competitive aspect that they wanted to try and address this year. I mean, it's still possible that Ilya Mikheyev, who had a really strong rookie season before the wrist laceration, he takes a big step. Alexander Kerfoot seemed to pick things up. Nick Robertson could try and fill some of that void, although, tamper the expectations a little bit. But I really do think that he was a really strong candidate that could have helped them out in that regard.
Kevin, what's the one move you wanted to see the Leafs make but didn't?
Well, I take so much heat when I write about this stuff, but to me, the core 4 and having 50% of your budget to 4 players kills me. Especially when one of those players is not that stud defenseman that is needed for a Stanley Cup team. We saw the formula. It has to be a Hedman back there. It has to be somebody that is that big stud. And if that was in the core 4, okay, maybe I could get by that. But still, you're talking 4 players that are 50% of the roster space, the cap for the Leafs. So to me, I wanted to see, and maybe we will see it. We saw the old prof wrote an article this week on the Hockey Writers talking about Mitch Marner is apparently being floated out there. Some agents are talking about that. Is that going to be a possibility? Because to me, a lot of people went crazy about the Nylander contract. The Marner contract, man, like you're talking 10.5 mil. That's maybe in a couple more years is going to be worth that. But right now in this window, and the salary cap is not moving anytime soon, I still want to see that core four. I want to see one player. To me, it's Mitch Marner has got to go. Probably going to have to retain some of the salary because of that too, because it's way over, and bring in that defenseman.
Andrew, where do you stand? Who did you want to see them bring in?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, like Kevin mentioned, with the stale cap, and you've got four guys basically eating up half your cap space. And I'll be the first to admit that I was one of the guys that kind of gave them heat for the Nylander contract. I just don't see the effort out on the ice. This year was a little bit different, but the guy I would like to see them bring in was Mackenzie Weegar. And I know there's a lot of speculation around him coming in, and I think, me personally, I've told Peter this, and I think personally he's one of the more underrated guys out there. And you could have got him for a relatively team friendly deal, in my opinion. I think it hurts right now with the way that taxes are in Toronto, and basically you're seeing a third of your contract by the end of it. But to bring in a guy like that, and anytime you can push Martin Marincin down your depth chart, I mean, that's a step in the right direction. So, I would like to see Mackenzie Weir come in. He, like I said, he plays the body. He's not afraid to lay down in front of the puck, and he's your prototypical, stay-at-home defenseman that's going to play the defensive end. So that's the guy I would have liked to see them bring in. That being said, I mean, TJ Brody, they got on a relatively decent deal, depending on how he pans out. And, even a guy like Zach Bogosian kind of fits that role. Mind you, I don't see him playing a full season, but I mean, Mackenzie Weegar be the guy that I wouldn't mind seeing them maybe bring in at some point.
I got two more questions for you guys. So Kevin, we'll start with you on this one. And it was kind of alluded to earlier with when John Tavares was brought up. And I want to kind of look at it from a moving forward, because you look at that contract, he's not getting any younger. He's got a lot of term left. He's got a lot of dollars coming in. I haven't heard that you mentioned Marner is the one that's kind of being floated out there. At least that's what the reports suggest. So how much concern do you guys have with Tavares moving forward? I know that he's still going to provide a lot of value, especially now, he's got the C, he still has a lot of talent, but moving forward, as that contract goes on, as he gets older, and as the term, you start to get toward the end of that contract, could that be a detriment to the team, in your opinion, in a few years?
There's no doubt. The biggest comparison I can go with that is a Jonathan Taves and a Ryan Getzlaff. Those guys are making 10.5, 8.5. They've got Stanley Cups though. So you don't mind paying out the big bucks at the end of that contract when you can still remember those boys lifting the Stanley Cup above their head. That's where it's going to come in for John Tavares. I remember the day that he signed, it's still celebrated. Last Canada Day was John Tavares Day. That was supposed to be the piece that was going to bring the Stanley Cup to Toronto, and that hasn't panned out. So that contract is going to look really, really bad if he's not holding a Stanley Cup up during the length of that deal at some point. Because you said he is getting along in there, but you hold up a Stanley Cup, man, break that 1967, and you'll get paid. It's okay. You've got the check then. But if he's not holding up that cup before the end, then that contract's going to look really bad as every year ticks by.
Andrew, where do you stand on the contract? How concerned are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough at this point because, that contract was signed in a time when you saw the cap continually increasing. So, I mean, it makes it tough because, we would have looked back on it another 2 years and said, it's not as bad as we think. But, with everything that's kind of happening right now, it brings it more into question. It makes it more concerning. I think, the Leafs didn't do him any favors in, one, signing him to that contract. Two, you're bringing him home. He's playing in front of friends and family. You're in the Mecca. You're in the hockey Mecca. And, now you throw C on his chest and expect him to be that guy. And, he had a great first year. That said, individual stats aren't going to win you Stanley Cups. So have a 50-goal season, that's fine. But It's what you do to make the people around you better. That's going to get you the Stanley Cup like Taves and Kane and earn you that money. And I think that's where it becomes concerning. I do think that Kevin is spot on. If he's got a window here, and he's got some young guys. He's got a great core. He's got some solid vets coming in that have that drive, that want to win that cup. And I think right now, if you don't get it done in the next 2 to 3 years, I think you're starting to question yourself, and the team's going to start questioning what they did when they signed that paper as well.
Yep. Peter, we'll give you the last word on Tavares.
Yeah, I mean, again, both of them nailed it on the head, especially with Andrew. I think the next 2 to 3 years is going to be really critical, because when you fork over that much money and that much term, there's always going to be concern with that. I mean, he's at 5 more years for $11 million. I mean, let's face it, that is a lot of money. And in those 2 to 3 years, it could, decide a lot of things. I mean, this year was kind of I'm going to say, quote unquote, a down year, despite the fact that he had 60 points in 63 games, which is still respectful. But he did have a broken finger. He did have an oblique injury before the World Hockey Championships last year. I know he had a lot of time to heal up for that, but I'm not going to say that was an excuse because of the amount of rest that he had heading into the season. But you kind of wondered if that weighed on him, and maybe he was trying to be a little bit extra cautious. And also the fact that, wearing the C, a season where there was a lot of issues regarding a coaching change, it was starting to weigh on him a bit. I think that got to him in that regard. And when the playing series came in, he kind of disappeared. Austin Matthews was the only player that showed up against the Columbus Blue Jackets, essentially. So I'm also trying to be really optimistic about this. And I guess this is just me being me. That's always in my nature, especially when it comes to this team. Because if there's anybody that could try and turn things around, it could be him. I mean, it's going to be him. He's shown that he could be a game-breaking player previously. I mean, he scored key goals last year, again, albeit regular season. And I'm not trying to draw a comparison here, but you look to what he did at the World Junior Championships in 2009, down 3-0 against Team USA. A lot of pressure, Canada playing in their on home soil. John Tavares staged a comeback and would have probably obviously one of the top 2 or 3 games Canada's played against the USA. If he could lead that charge, albeit, a younger, more youthful John Tavares, who's to say that he can't possibly do it right now that he's got a letter, now that, he's got Joe Thornton over his back, now that he's got Spezza again and Wayne Simmons, maybe right now he feels like, okay, we got the players to succeed. We got the players to, show them around. It's up to me to try and keep that, line going and keep the focus going forward.
Well said, guys. So we're down to our final question here just after 9:00. So whenever this season starts, so don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how many games. We don't know if the Leafs are going to be part of an all-Canadian division. A lot to work out. But the thing that I'm curious about, and Andrew, we're going to start with you on this one. Do you feel like that with the core 4, so we know that Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander, is this the last go-around for the core 4 as we know it, especially if they get bounced early again?
The only one that's for sure not going anywhere is probably Tavares, only because he's got the no trade clause. That being said, I think Dubas showed us this offseason that be ready for anything. Did anybody expect Captain to go the way that he did? Did anybody, see Janssen kind of going for what he did? I think that like I said, I was hard on Nylander. Last season he had kind of a breakout year and really showed that he can put the effort in offensively and did show glimpses of developing a little bit defensively. He still shies away from the physical game. But I can't see Matthews going anywhere. I'd be shocked if Marner goes somewhere, only because of the contract and where the cap is at this point in time. You're looking at probably another year or 2 before somebody's willing to take on that contract. But that being said, like Kevin alluded to earlier, if the Leafs are willing to eat some cap, you might see a guy like Marner or Nylander traded. I don't think you see Matthews or Tavares go. if anybody goes, it's going to be Marner or Nylander. I would say they've probably got 2 years left to go, only because of where the state of the game is right now. But following that second year, if there's still no success, there's going to be some big changes throughout the lineup and probably throughout the management team as well.
Peter, is this the last time I'm going to watch the core for this season, in your opinion?
Yeah. Again, it all depends on if they make the playoffs, which it could happen given the fact that they are a very skilled team. But if they get ousted in the first round, then, kind of similar to what happened last year with the Nazem Kadri trade, a big move is going to happen, whether it be in the form of Mitch Marner or William Nylander. Both have upside, but you have to look at the contracts. And Nylander has a cheaper cap hit. He could be easier to move than, let's say, Mitch Marner. Again, all hypothetical depending on what happens. But Dubas has shown that he hasn't been happy with, the state of the team has been the last few years. He tried going one approach, it didn't work, and he's trying to go the approach where teams actually win games, being more physical when it matters, getting guys like Thornton, Simmons, and Bogosian to bring up physical presence and bring that aggressive style in. You can't win on skill alone. Those intangibles are going to be a real factor. I mean, look at Tampa Bay. They were all skill or a skill for like maybe their top 6, had some skill in their top 9, and only one line to get it done in a checking line kind of role. They found that success this year. They got depth players in Barclay Goodrow, and, they seem to have a major impact. And it worked out. They won the Stanley Cup. It's worked out for the Washington Capitals. You can't just rely on skill the whole entire time. And Mark, you also came out with a really great piece about like Columbus helping or aiding other teams in their path to achieving success. And Tampa Bay was, again, most recent example. Toronto lost to Columbus this year. Could that be the final nail in the coffin that says, hey, you know what? Again, I know I said this before. Enough is enough. Can we turn this around? Because we have the skill to do it. It's just putting your mindset forward.
And thank you for bringing that piece up real quick. Yeah, I mean, you look at the Capitals were down 2-0 before they won the Stanley Cup in the first round to Columbus. It took double overtime of game 3 to get back in that series, and they didn't lose again. Boston was down 2-1 in their series in the second round against Columbus. They turned it around and won 3 straight on the way to a game 7 in the Stanley Cup final loss. And the precedence is there because Columbus plays that hard style, and every team has been able to adjust because they did have a high-end talent advantage. The Leafs are there. And I'm going to say this, don't sleep on these Leafs at all. I mean, think about, Wayne Simmons coming in, and think about Joe Thornton coming in. I mean, you're talking about leadership. You're talking about being hard to play against. Bogosian fits into that example. He just got done winning a Stanley Cup. There's a lot coming in. I feel like Dubas did a really good job of addressing the needs that were there. Columbus exposed the needs, and given the limitations that Dubas had, he did his best to address them. So I definitely feel like they're going to take a step in the right direction. I'm just not sure if it's going to be all the way to a cup or not. You guys mentioned about the defense earlier, but I do think they're definitely going in the right direction. So Kevin, I'll give you the last word on this. Where do you think everything stands? Is this the last season of the core 4?
There's so many unknowns right now, because if we were talking, pre-COVID and an 82 game season and things are regular, everyone's traveling around the country, that type of deal. If you got to the quarter pole and it looked like last season at the quarter pole, then there might be a shakeup even at that point. But in your words, Mark, you even said it, Dubas did do a good job in this offseason, but he did it with these huge limitations. And those limitations are not going away anytime soon with this cap remaining in place flat for who knows how long. And the limitation is because you have 4 players eating up 50%. And if they're not past that first round in the next playoffs, whatever that looks like, if they're not showing quite a bit more and a second round, a third round even, then you've got to eliminate some of those limitations, and you've got to open up some cap to bring in some different pieces. They've done a great job. Now it's to see if that can actually work out with a new third and fourth line to help out those 4 very rich players.
And fans, now you know how this all impacts the Leafs. This trio of writers, I mean, we cannot say enough good things about them. Please follow them. Andrew, Peter, Kevin, great job tonight on the panel. Thank you all very much for joining in on the Hockey Writers Live tonight. We very much appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. So fans, next week, just a quick, a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to be on next Tuesday. Obviously next week is American Thanksgiving. So we're going to aim to go Tuesday night. We'll work on a guest, and we'll work also on finding a panel. And once we know what those are, we'll make sure that we announce those to you. So just, again, make sure you hit like on Facebook. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. We very much appreciate you joining in, on our conversation. Like I said, we really hope that this hour or so, gives you a little bit of a distraction from what's going on in the world. Please be safe. Please listen to everybody out there. We all want to get back to hockey. I mean, it's kind of hitting us that we're at the end of November and we're still kind of waiting on what's going to happen. But, if we all do our part, we each have a responsibility, to ourselves and to each other to do our part, we can get back quicker. So be safe, be healthy. Thanks again for joining. We look forward to seeing you for episode 9 next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Talk to you then.